Derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results.
So stressful when the world's on fire. Good God. I can't look at this, guys. Like, my strategy is you buy it and you hope that you got a good spot. Yeah, but we all think you're crazy. You don't fight this. No way. The markets are freaking out and you don't think that anything is wrong? Come back tomorrow and I'll lose it all. Should be fun.
No, that is the wrong music. There we go. All right, guys. Thursday. I'm feeling pretty good today. We are here on time. I had a good breakfast. And we got some stuff going on today. We've got initial jobless claims coming up. We've got some Fed speakers. We got stuff going on in Japan. So let's go look at the charts and see where we're at. All right, so here's the treasuries. We're a little bit lower than we were yesterday, but it does look like we retraced most of that crazy movement from upwards. And we were getting some news about New York Community Bank looking for some money, and then later we got a headline that they had found some money. So that has happened a couple of times where they like spread the rumor that somebody's looking like after they've already found it, so that, you know, the market gets a little scared and then, oh, okay, it's all okay, and, you know, the people involved make money. So, but then overnight we got some more like comments from the Japanese central bank and so forth, and that seems to be pushing the treasuries up further, and we're getting like really high now into this place where, you know, CPI doesn't matter anymore. Well, maybe that CPI doesn't matter because, I mean, it was hawkish, but nobody in the market seems to think that that is going to last. And the S&P 500 is still a little bit mixed, but we're getting a really strong rally here in the overnight session. Oil spiking, coming back down yesterday. This one is really wild, and there was some really strong hedging flows on this where, like, they were selling it the whole way. So I'm not entirely sure what to think of oil, but it was pretty crazy over there, right? And gold and silver just continue to be up. The gold in particular has really moved strongly. So it seems like that the markets are concerned about currency devaluation, but it's not showing up in the treasuries. It's all going to gold. And here we got copper having that's a pretty good move and breaking out to some new local highs in the overnight session. So that's definitely one I want to keep an eye on now. That's a significant development. And then here you can see the Japanese yen rising up overnight and the dollar seeing some weakness as a result. Bitcoin still hasn't made another push at the 7,000, but they've made a pretty good recovery, so they are well within striking distance. And, you know, with the way that things have been going, wouldn't be surprised to see them make that attempt today or tomorrow. They love to have this sort of like setup where they're ready to go overnight or over the weekend. They're ready to go, and then they go into the weekend, and then they can just pump it as hard as they possibly can over the weekend when there's less liquidity. So I'm going to move that back over here to the treasury. And let me come over here. Good morning, Dom, A. Paul, Alan White, Rob Stifles. Thank you for joining the stream bright and early every day, guys. All right, so let's okay, gotta reload my financial juice tab here. Okay, so we had the ECB statement. Totally forgot about that. So we are gonna have ECB press conference in about 15 minutes. Powell will be testifying at 10 o'clock. And Messer will be speaking at 11:30. There's also a bill auction. And there are the Fed quarterly financial accounts as well. So Wait, I thought there was something before she spoke. Maybe not. Oh, we also get trade balance. That's pretty important too. So we got a lot going on here. Although I do not like trading when there are speakers and the ECB in particular. So we might be sitting here for a little bit. I shaved yesterday and I just don't I think it looks better in person, but it doesn't look as good on camera. So I made it a little bit too short that time. All right. California moves to expand zero-down interest-free home loan program to illegal immigrants. That seems like that's going to really help the, affordability crisis in California, won't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not too much in the way of, social media here this morning. What the? Okay, Nassim Taleb, 30 minutes ago. Cognitive decline doesn't start when you forget the names of people you know. It starts when you forget the names of your enemies. Oh, okay, Nassim. You have enemies, huh? Okay. Poll, did the recent Google Gemini disaster dampen your faith in AI being the next huge thing? Well, I still think that AI is the next huge thing. It just probably not in the way that people think. I think that, when you go and you apply machine learning models to find optimal solutions to things within your business, there's all sorts of insane productivity increases that you can make. They don't necessarily get rid of jobs, and they're not necessarily related to chat GPTs. But you know what? GPTs so far are mostly toys. So their market's probably getting ahead of itself. Joseph Wing, nice overview of European bond market complex that is also broken down by country. The review finds liquidity is okay, but disappears when you need it. Okay, well, here comes the numbers. Okay, initial jobless claims 217 versus 216. The trade balance, though, much larger than anticipated. Negative 67.4 versus an 63.5. That's probably going to move the dollar. Yeah, dollar not moving as strongly off of that as I thought it might. So I think it's best for me to just sit tight and watch the ECB press conference. Good morning, Uzi. So it looks like after kind of, well, I don't know. There was, I mean, we did have a little spike up off of the news and everything, but I would say overall the market response to all of this is a little lackluster. S&P 500 now is all of a sudden taking off like 3 or 4 minutes after the release. Well, let's say 3 minutes after the release. The dollar is moving here, but which way it actually goes, I'm not so sure. They initially sold, now they're buying it up. Seems a little bit more choppy than usual. So here's a post on Reddit that's like from the algo trading subreddit, and they're like, I want to know what the win rate for people's algos are. Please only post your win rate if your algo is in production, trading with real money, and your algo has made more than 100 trades. And I kind of find that curious that he chose 100 trades, but maybe that's just a filter to ensure that like they're actually being used. Yeah, but 90%, these win rates that you're going to see don't tell you a whole lot without the R factor involved, right? Wow, this guy says that he has a 77% win rate, but at 8.6 profit factor? Wow. That is a little wild. But he says, you know, market has been favorable. But he doesn't think that that's standard performance. Still, that, I don't think I've ever had an algorithm that even in favorable markets performs that well. That is a little crazy. See, here's somebody 57.4 with equal risk reward. That's kind of like what I would be looking for. Now I'm going down through this guy's user history to see if there's anything interesting that gives us some insight into what maybe he's trying to do. He does seem to be talking about bonds in many places. Personal finance, New Zealand. Theta gang. I'm less interested if it's options. Oh, he is doing daily strategies. He's more mean reversion, but it's a longer term portfolio strategy, not a day trading strategy. Of course. What's this say, Paul? I dropped my toothbrush off the sink this morning. It fell headfirst, stabbing into the wood floor almost an inch deep, enough to keep the brush suspended by the head. My house isn't doing that. Wow, what the heck? Like there's a hole in your floor an inch deep? What? I know, right? I didn't think it was that bad, but boy, it's getting... I don't think when you buy a house that most homeowners realize the amount of capital that you end up putting into fixing the house up and stuff. These people that say that, like, you know, in the long run, renting is cheaper, they're not wrong. It's just that you don't build wealth that way, so... This other one that's making a claim doesn't have a whole lot of anything. He's only been around since November. And the only post that I see is him claiming that FTMO isn't paying out. Okay. Yeah. That was one of the more interesting threads I've seen on that subreddit. I turned the microphone off for a second and forgot to turn it back on. This thing, there was they did take a new high, and a decent amount of volume went in there to take out the iceberg. 5K iceberg. They did clear it, but then it ticked back down again. Let's see. Ooh, and then it ticked down at 25. Well, that kind of action right there is the sort of thing that could create a liquidity hole, though. I'm just gonna wait and see. Oh boy. R/trading. I was new to trading and I got to know that institutions control the charts and I wanted to know how they trade and how things actually work. Yeah. I already got some ideas about how things work that are wrong. They don't work. Well, the way that the institutions trade is basically they make money off of executing trades for other people. Okay, so interesting. They decided after a little bit of back and forth there to push to new highs and a little bit of a stop run and a large order now forming at 26 just below us. I always get a little suspicious when I see that kind of setup where we break out and like there's this huge bid sitting below it. Why would you put that there? You think that that's actually going to fill? I don't know, but I'm definitely seeing the volume come through like across the board long. It's probably more aggressive, let's say, in the 5-year and 30, but the 10-year just, you know, there was pretty big change in cumulative delta there. So with 6,000 contracts now pushing through after that, that's wow, that's actually, you know, to have seen like a 5K and then trying to come down and then breaking higher and pushing into another 7 into 27, that's pretty crazy. Might be about time for me to try and pull up the ECB here. Yeah. Yep, exactly. 8K shows up on the bid. 6.4K icebergs the offer. Then the 8K vanishes. Yeah. This is super sketch, isn't it? And it was at 26. And by the way, it did not trigger. None of that triggered my. Well, actually, no, I take that back. There was a click. It was 3,000. Wait, is this one not clicking? No, is it? Yeah, no. I don't know why it didn't seem to notice the click, but the click was there. But you're right. Like, it pulled. It pulled basically. If it wasn't for the ECB press conference starting, I would maybe be like looking at that, like if we get low enough taking a short, but probably not worth it. Yeah, is that the start of a move down now? That's the sort of setup that's certainly the sort of setup that starts a down move, isn't it? Okay, we'll put up the ECB press conference like that, even though I don't really like watching it. You think so? Actually, you know what? That's probably the best theory. Is that somebody wanted to be out before the press conference, and that does not really give us a whole lot in terms of like what the next step is going to be. Like, is it gonna move back down and all that? Like, if there was a little bit of manipulation and then a bunch of orders came in through in this area, then most likely thing is that it just kind of sits here now. Of course, the ECB probably is going to move the market, so. But that, I can't guess what that's going to do, so it doesn't give me a trade. Okay. They're still waiting. Okay, here we go.
Conference. On stage are President Lagarde.
The ECB press conference has now begun.
My name is Wolfgang Preußel. We are, as always, in a hybrid format, so if journalists have a question, please turn on the microphones and the cameras. And with that, I'll hand over to President Lagarde.
So I'm going to turn my news squawk off here.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang, and good afternoon to all of you who could make it to Frankfurt today. So, the Vice President and I welcome you to our press conference. The Governing Council today decided to keep the 3 key ECB interest rates unchanged. Since our last meeting in January, inflation has declined further. In the latest ECB staff projections, inflation has been revised down, in particular for 2024, which mainly reflects a lower contribution from energy prices. Staff now project inflation to average 2.3% in 24, 2% in 25 and 1.9% in 26. The projections for inflation excluding energy and food have also been revised down and average 2.6% for 24, 2.1% for 25 and 2% for 26. Although most measures of underlying inflation have eased further, domestic price pressures remain high, in part owing to strong growth in wages. Financing conditions are restrictive and our past interest rate increases continue to weigh on demand, which is helping push down inflation. Staff have revised down their growth projections for 24 to 0.6%, with economic activity expected to remain subdued in the near term. Thereafter, staff expect the economy to pick up and to grow at 1.5% in 25 and 1.6% in 26, supported initially by consumption and later also by investment. We are determined to ensure that inflation returns to our 2% medium-term target in a timely manner. Based on our current assessment, we consider that the key ECB interest rates are at levels that, maintained for a sufficiently long duration,
Well, there's 25.
make a substantial contribution to this goal. Our future decisions will ensure that our policy rates will be set at sufficiently
Time for the Europors to lecture us.
long as necessary. We will continue to follow a data-dependent approach to determining the appropriate level and duration.
You know what we should do is we should have ECB bingo.
Will be based on our assessment.
Oh my
of
gosh,
the
is that a thing?
in light of the incoming economic and financial data, the dynamics of underlying inflation.
Yeah, that spoofy scenario was. I'm not gonna say it's like. I mean, look, it happened at what? The big order was at 26. There was some big action at 25 before that, so we're below that. I'm not gonna say that it's like that was like a super key signal to go short, and then it's gonna come all the way back down. But you know, on the they wanted to get out before the ECB. I think that's a pretty good. I think that's a pretty good explanation for what we just saw there, for sure.
Continued to hold
Pretty
back
sketchy.
on their spending, investment moderated, and companies exported less.
I'm gonna post that one.
Slowdown in external demand and some losses in competitiveness. However, surveys point to a gradual recovery over the course of this year. As inflation falls and wages continue to grow, real incomes will rebound, supporting growth. In addition, the dampening impact of past interest rate increases will gradually fade, and demand for euro area exports should pick up. The unemployment rate is at its lowest since the start of the euro. Employment grew by 0.3% in the final quarter of 2023, again outpacing economic activity. As a result, output per person declined further. Meanwhile, employers are posting fewer job vacancies, while fewer firms are reporting that their production is being limited by labor shortages. Governments should continue to roll back energy-related support measures to allow the disinflation process to proceed sustainably. Fiscal and structural policies should be strengthened to make our economy more productive and more competitive.
I'll post that one on Twitter so we can remember it.
Gradually bring down high public debt ratios. A speedier implementation of the Next Generation EU program and
Yeah, I feel bad for all those retail schmucks
to remove
who
national
hurled themselves into 27 off of the strong bid. Yeah.
more integrated banking and capital markets can help increase investment in the green and digital
So again,
transitions
if we just broke out and there's a huge bid just below us, why?
revised economic
Why would you do that?
should be
Like, logically, it makes no sense to me.
So let's look at inflation. Inflation
ECB bingo, take a shot every time she says robust.
2.8% in January, and according to Eurostat's
That sounds more like it, yeah.
further to 2.6%.
That's a drinking game. I don't know if you would last very long if that was the
Again,
drinking game.
5.6% in January and 4% in February, while energy prices in both months continued to decline compared with a year ago, but at a lower rate than in December. Goods price inflation also fell further to 2% in January and 1.6% in February. Services inflation, after remaining at 4% for 3 months in a row, edged lower to 3.9% in February. Most measures of underlying
Have you already talked about the reason for? Yeah, I have actually. I actually did.
Supply shocks continued.
Did you have questions or thoughts about it?
Policy weighed on demand. However, domestic price pressures are still elevated, in part owing to robust wage growth and falling labor productivity.
Thought it was a pretty good primer on the quant world.
Signs that growth in wages is starting to moderate. In addition, profits are absorbing part of the rising labor costs,
That's completely new to you. Well,
reduces the inflationary effects.
the next thing I would do then is I would
Expected
read
to continue
Nassim
the
Taleb's
downward
stuff.
Trend in the coming months. Further ahead, it is expected to decline to our target as labor costs moderate and the effect of past energy shocks, supply bottlenecks, and the reopening of the economy after the pandemic fade. Measures of longer-term inflation expectations remain broadly stable, with most standing around 2%. Looking now at the risk assessment. The risks to economic growth remain tilted to the downside. Growth could be lower if the effects of monetary policy turn out stronger than expected. A weaker world economy or a further slowdown in global trade would also weigh on euro area growth. Russia's unjustified war against Ukraine and the tragic conflict in the Middle East are major sources of geopolitical risk. This may result in firms and households becoming less confident about the future.
I love the convenience of the pandemic for both economic policy and earnings,
could
because
be
2020 is basically everyone's zero
Inflation
line.
comes down more quickly than expected, and rising real incomes mean that spending increases by more than anticipated, or if the world economy grows more strongly than expected.
The thing that weirds me out is that, in my mind, basically everything since 2020 is like unusual, right? But it's been 4 years. So, like, that unusual market is like most
Inflation could also
baselines now, you know?
anticipated if wages increase by more than expected, or
It's
profit
only been
margins
this year that, like, liquidity in the treasury market has gotten back to normal,
Whilst inflation
for
may
instance.
surprise on the downside if monetary policy dampens demand more than expected, or if the economic environment in the rest of the world worsens unexpectedly. Financial monetary conditions now. Market interest rates have risen since our January meeting, and our monetary policy has kept broader financing conditions restrictive. Lending rates on business loans have broadly stabilized, while mortgage rates declined in December and January. Nevertheless, lending rates remain elevated at 5.2% for business loans and 3.9% for mortgages. Bank lending to firms had turned positive in December, growing at an annual rate of 0.5%. But in January, it edged lower to 0.2%, owing to a negative flow in the month. The growth in loans to households continued to weaken, falling to 0.3% on an annual basis in January. Broad money, as measured by M3, grew at a subdued rate of 0.1%. So in conclusion, the Governing Council today decided to keep the three key ECB interest rates unchanged. We are determined to ensure that inflation returns to our 2% medium-term target in a timely manner. Based on our current assessment, we consider that the key ECB interest rates are at level that, maintained for a sufficiently long duration, will make a substantial contribution to this goal. Our future decisions will ensure that our policy rates will be set at sufficiently restrictive levels for as long as necessary. We will continue to follow a data-dependent approach to determining the appropriate level and duration of restriction. And in any case, we stand ready to adjust all of our instruments.
Maybe next pandemic, don't approach it like it's a horror movie and you'll come out of it okay.
Target to preserve the smooth functioning of monetary policy transmission.
Well, remember, I remember at the beginning of the pandemic doing a bunch of research like what was the economic impact of the plague and everything. And like the end result of it was that the economic impacts of the plague was really good for the people that lasted, but it took like a really, really long time for them to see those benefits. And in the short term, for the 10 or 20 years, and of course the plague was kind of like an on and off thing too, so that kind of factored in too. But it was like that for the first 10 years, it was awful.
Target at some point in time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For
I remember everyone saying the virus is going to evolve to be more deadly. Yeah, that didn't make sense.
Question with something that we discussed.
There's still some responses going way back that don't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Like people saying, well, okay, yeah, most people will survive it, but we don't know what the long-term effects of the virus are.
As some of you will
for
remember,
instance,
the Governing Council had taken a view on capital market.
Why would you think that there's long-term effects? And yet now we kind of see that there are some long-term effects. But given what we knew at the beginning, I think that there would be no logical reason to think that there are long-term effects. But so here's my theory. I think that the theory that it was a man-made virus that escaped from a Wuhan lab is a more serious theory than it was given credit for, and that there was some people in government and intelligence communities that were working off of that assumption. Like, I think that China's response to the virus only makes sense if they know that it was a man-made virus, you know?
So, on inflation.
I didn't really need to go down conspiracy theory lane there, but for some reason I did.
Inflationary process, and we are making progress. You know, we came from 2.9% in December, 2.8% in January, 2.6% in February. So there is a definite decline, which
it's so sketch because the origin of it shouldn't be controversial, right? Except for that Fauci, for some reason, was very, very adamant that it was not treated as a man-made.
Sufficiently confident.
And it was Fauci in particular that pushed that.
More evidence, more data, and
the conspiracy was whether or not it was released. I don't think it was released intentionally.
Few months, We will know a little more in April.
I also don't think that it was like a weaponized virus, right?
So this is really what
I think that they were just kind of doing research. There is some usefulness in like pushing viruses and seeing what they can do, and then
of the three criteria,
seeing how you deal with that and so forth.
outlook, which, as you will have
But
noted in
I think that it was something that was never intended to get out.
slightly, revised, a bit more for 24, granted, but slightly both for headlines and core in the next 2 years, 24.
Because if it was going to be intentional, then I think that you would
more confident about
want to release something that's really quite devious. But
second
I think that they released something that they were still studying and didn't understand, you know?
and
I don't think that it was
front as
intentional.
well,
I don't
we
think it
are
was released. It
seeing
escaped.
a narrowing
Escaped.
of the range between the various measures that we use. We are also seeing a general.
I remember seeing a story a while ago
Back to that if you want.
that basically the U.S. intelligence community had intelligence that suggested to them pretty early on that it escaped from the lab.
Meeting by meeting.
And I was expecting to see that information leaked, you know, pretty soon afterwards, because we often see that when stories like that hit the media, but like everybody just forgot about it, and we never got the info on that one.
To make us confident enough yet at this
That's why I feel comfortable enough suggesting that
Goes to Alex.
at this point I think it probably was escaped from the lab.
Please.
Thanks a lot for taking my question.
Not proven, but
Since you said you will know a lot more in June. Was this the majority view in the governing council? That
now that's curious to me here. You know, I'm probably not paying attention very good, but they're talking about June. We'll know a lot more in June.
wage growth. Can you
That's
be,
curious that they're
specific
putting their kind of
how
key
much
decision
will that
like
increase
that far out
for
now.
you to be comfortable,
But that was kind of where the market was also saying, like, if we cut, the first cut might be in June.
general broad agreement about the fact that we will get a lot more data and a lot more information in June. That's a certainty. I think there was also a very broad agreement around the fact that we will not change our views on one single data. And what we are seeing in the data at the moment are indicating certain movements, directionally good, but it is not strong enough and durable enough for the moment to give us sufficient confidence. So that was a generally accepted sentiment around the room. And the decision that we made was a unanimous decision, by the way. You are correct that while we continue to look at the three components of the inflation outlook, of the underlying inflation and the strength of monetary policy, there is two components that we are particularly vigilant about. And those two components are the wage evolution as well as the profit evolution. Unit labor cost, unit profit are two items that we will be particularly attentive to and will continue to be attentive to.
Yeah,
I mentioned that in the underlying inflation...
kind of, it just makes me think about
which is
this
not moving in the same
larger thing
direction
I've been
as the
thinking
others.
about all
The
month,
others
which
are
is that
generally
everybody
declining and
is
ranging
saying
between,
we need to be concerned about some maniacal dictator coming and, you know, pushing the population into committing a genocide or some other kind of
for most
extravagant
services,
scenario like
for most
that.
services,
You know,
labor
World War
is
II all over
very
again.
sensitive to wage.
And I think that the American system is really resilient against that sort of a thing, and that the issue that we have in the postmodern age is a different kind of issue. It's the tyranny of the system. We'll put systems together that are flawed, and those systems become so entrenched that you can't change and improve the society, and it leads to all sorts of
whether or not profit
problems
absorb and
of
act
that
as a buffer,
sort.
for the wage increase.
And you can see it in, like, at every level of corporations, every industry, like pharmaceuticals.
Per employee.
It's just like
Our assessment for the moment is,
all over.
is declining relative to the
like the way that the pharma industry acted during the pandemic is kind of like
the various
not what we would want, right?
to look at. We look at some backward-looking elements, but we also try to be as forward-looking as we can by, really.
I don't think that the information we were given on the efficacy of vaccines at the very beginning was honest information.
Thank you. And the next question goes to Aude Kozulek.
I remember the arguments with people because they're like, oh, this vaccine is like 99% effective. And then people that actually read the studies were like, actually, that's not what it's saying. You are deceiving by saying that. And then now we come out and it turns out that the vaccines are not that effective at all.
A few days ago, Mario Draghi tells in a speech in Washington.
There's my favorite reporter. I like her outfit. Good jacket there.
Do you agree with that?
But where's our bald friends? Or not our balding friend.
Transitions may be delayed because of high rates.
Thank you for your question. On, I wouldn't say that underlying inflation is the only figure that is above 2%.
The ventilators is another
interesting
interesting
one. At the inflation outlook, which includes, of course, the headline inflation, which is the one that, under our strategy review.
But here again, tyranny of the system, right? The system makes a decision on not a whole lot of information, but the system feels like it needs to make a decision. And then once they've made the decision, they just push it on everybody because otherwise people would question the system.
Remove the
it's just wild.
And try to really measure each and every time.
And then anybody that tries to be independently minded gets, savaged online. It was just crazy.
Closer to our target. We're not there yet.
These people, those of us on the right and those of us that were like really, I wasn't so engaged in those conversations. I was just kind of like, let's just try and make sure that I'm as informed as possible.
We are at 2% in 25.
But some of these people are going to be traumatized for life about this, right?
Sorry.
Never gonna, like, you can tell. I can tell it super bothers Uzi the way that it went down, right? He's never gonna get over it.
Finally reaching 2% in
A lot of people on the right are never gonna get over it.
That we will wait until we are at 2% and that we see 2% to take a decision. This is not what I'm saying here. But in terms
nearly everything about how we handled COVID defied logic.
Core, this is what we are seeing. We are all looking forward.
You're talking about a really broad stroke there, right?
Enrico later on the single market, which, would...
I don't know what was all of the things that we did about how we handled COVID is a pretty big list, right?
And we're very much looking forward.
That's like there's going to be people in the future that like are historians and like their whole specialty, their whole life is around studying what happened during the 2020 pandemic, right?
And I will wait until we have the report to react to his proposals. But, we have a mandate, we have a mission, we are determined to reach our 2% inflation target in the medium term, and we will be riveted to that.
Thank you, Madame Lagarde. And the next question goes to Balazs Koranyi of Reuters. Balazs, please.
Let me have a sip of water first.
Good afternoon, President. Since our last meeting here, market expectations have gone through a serious revision. There's been a big repricing. How well is the current market pricing aligning with your own views? Are you happy with what's been happening in the market? Is this a better reflection of where you think policy might be going? The other question is about the framework review. Could you tell us where that is standing now? Where is it going? What's the next step in terms of timeline? And is the minimum reserve ratio part of that discussion?
Thank you much for the two questions. I've tried in the past to refrain from passing judgment and commenting specifically on market expectations. I just note that it seems to be converging better, but that's, everyone has to do their job. They do their job, we do our job. We look at the three elements, we look at our projections, we try to anticipate the impact of our monetary policy, and that's how we make decisions, not by being determined by what markets consider. So in terms of the operational framework, we have had a discussion, short of course, because the main agenda yesterday and today was monetary policy, but we had a discussion yesterday morning.
Well, so if I were going to talk about like major decisions, right?
Areas of discussion.
I think major decision number one was to shut things down. I believe that based on the information that we had, and both based on the information that we had and on the way that things played out, that it was a good idea to flatten the curve. Okay? But then, some places kept things closed down afterwards. That was decision number 2. And then decision number 3 was to shut the schools down. And the latter two were terrible decisions. Basically, what happened was Donald Trump shut the economy down because that seemed to be the thing that made the most sense. And then everything after that then became politically motivated. And those decisions, it seems to me, were made because of political implications and not because those were the best decisions for people.
Thank you, Madame Lagarde. And the next question is for Martin Arnold of the Financial Times. Martin, please.
Hello, I have 2 questions, Madame Lagarde. The first one is about the pace at which you're going to be normalizing policy once you do.
Why is Odd like smirking there?
Said they think that
you serious? It's just like this gentle smile. What is so funny, Odd? What are you?
Do you agree with that?
What is
a bit different.
Is that just the way she is, or is something funny here?
The frozen.
Okay, yeah. There now she's singing. She's like, "Be serious, Odd. Be serious. We're on television."
Some way, the Ukrainian government and their defense against the Russian aggression. What do you think about that?
I don't know what it is, but I just think that she's so beautiful, though.
On your first question.
How do you know it was a clinical trial? Easy, because unvaccinated people only needed 1 shot and they're good, and people who got 6 of them in 2... Well,
in the holding season, we will move to the restrictiveness.
Maybe the chubby guy is always joking around and it's funny to see him. I don't know. So, I don't remember the last ECB press conference, but she is sitting next to different people.
So be it.
Than she usually does. So I don't know. I don't know what the deal is.
Kind of, pace, rhythm, magnitude, because we will continue to be data dependent.
There's this guy that I've kind of looked into him and his work and everything, and I actually quite like the guy, but he has the worst horseshoe thing going on. Just shave it, man. And she's usually sitting next to him, and I don't see him this time.
Determine future moves. On your second question, it's a matter which is under discussion.
It's a sore subject for me, maybe, because despite living in Florida the little bit, we did slice our business in half, and it still hasn't recovered. Wow.
Which is a complicated issue.
Yeah, and that's in Florida. Well, you should live in Utah. If you were in Utah, you probably would be back you'd probably be recovered. So Utah did the best.
We'll need significant.
But maybe that's why I come down on this issue the way that I do, because from my perspective, Utah flattened the curve for 2 weeks, and then immediately after, everything opened back up. And there was some municipalities that were super far left that tried to keep everything shut down, but everybody just ignored them because the state said you could be open now, right? And Utah fared the best. Utah recovered the best out of any of the other states. So the original plan, shut down for 2 weeks to flatten the curve and then open things back up, was I think, the correct plan.
To the international monetary order and the rule of law which has been enforced for decades.
Yeah, but I think my contention is more with the broader fear-mongering that impacted people. Yeah, that's true. It took longer for people to really like open back up because the television was still like, you know, doom everything 24/7.
Which, you know, could possibly prosper, but that's clearly work in progress on which we, you know, have no final say. It will be for the leaders to decide what happens.
Thank you. Turning now to the online participants, I'd like to give the floor to Fabrizio Goria of La Stampa. Fabrizio, please.
Thank you, Wolfgang, and thank you, President Lagarde, for taking my question. There are two questions, actually. So the first one is, do you see any possibility that the Federal Reserve decisions could affect the ECB moves? And the second one is about the commercial real estate market. Do you see any vulnerabilities in the European CRA market, considering the stress that we're seeing in the United States? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. On the mandate that we have, the mission that we have, the ECB acts independently, and we will do what we have to do when we have to do it. Obviously, we are mindful of the international environment in which we operate, but if the conditions are satisfied, if our diagnosis is that we have been restrictive for long enough to be sufficiently confident that we will reach our 2% targets, we will make our decision. I know there is...
Yeah. And then the big brains were like, oh, we were operating with incomplete information. And then, yeah, you, at the time, though, you were basically saying, you know everything, and that what you said was the word of God. Yeah.
We have to act in accordance with our...
But you know what pisses me off? You know what pisses me off?
Dear Vice President,
is all of these people that are like, we didn't force you to take the vaccine. Are you effing kidding me?
Well,
like, the people were talking about putting everybody that's not vaccinated in concentration camps and crap. You have the audacity to say that, like, we didn't try and coerce anybody? Give me... Oh my gosh, that is just such... It's gaslighting. It's gaslighting. And you know what the crazy thing is like the nature of the internet is it's so temporary that like a lot of the evidence, you know, is gone. Some of it. There are some conservatives that when that happened, they came out and they pulled out the receipts. There were some people that kept the receipts though, you know.
Close to 5%.
It reminds me of mostly peaceful protests. Oh my gosh, yeah, that was just... Oh
but the problem is not the average. And the problem, and this happens...
Did you see that story where, I think it was in Portland, but I don't remember what municipality it was, but basically there was some sort of a riot, and the right-wing people involved were prosecuted and the left-wing people weren't, and the court threw it out because they said that they didn't prosecute everybody equally.
And this is something that, well, we have been monitoring very closely. We have not seen so far any sort of, let's say, widespread contagion because of the evolution of commercial real estate. We have indicated several times that the exposure of the non-banks is much bigger, is larger than the exposure of the banks. So I repeat again, this is something that we have been looking at very carefully, and is one of the main risks for financial stability at present.
Thank you very much.
You got to dig deep for that kind of news nowadays.
The next question goes to Santi Pinol.
Well, but, you know, I don't think that it's all terrible.
Thanks. Good afternoon,
because I think that I see really strong signs that now people, in charge, these boomers that are hyper rich and are kind of some of the drivers of policy can see it. They can't see it. If you look at what people were saying at Davos this year, I see change. I see a group of people that realize that the age of globalism is over and that they kind of have to adjust. I see people that realize that government has made a bunch of big mistakes. I see people that realize that their approach to the political spectrum was wrong. Right?
aiming at
it's funny because like the floor is shifting underneath of us again and nobody realizes it, just like nobody realized it when it was happening and what led up to Donald Trump coming along. But like the thing is, Donald Trump became popular because he served a demographic of people in the United States that has been underserved, people that have not really done all of that well the last 30 to 50 years and have had their living basically exported overseas, right? Well, now that shift has already kind of happened. After the pandemic, they decided, oh, we need to have our own local supply chains, right? But we're still getting this shift where large groups of people, and in this instance, I'm talking particularly about rich people, are realizing that the systems don't really represent their interests very well anymore. That's why I think that you're seeing large numbers of minorities in the United States, for instance, starting to move towards Trump. Like of course, most of them are still Democrat, but Trump's numbers on these things are like better than ever. Okay, if the Democrat Party loses these demographics, they're screwed, right? This is why I think you're starting to see people in Democrat cities even start to turn against the immigration thing, because they go, oh, actually, it's not what we were told. We were told, oh, it's okay, as we can have as much illegal immigration as possible because it's good for the economy. Well, there are things that are good about it, but it's not good for everybody. And ironically, in these big cities, some of these people, they wanted their services and everything, and they're getting their services taken away, right? And we're seeing it at like corporate level too. For instance, Jamie Dimon saying, well, you know what, Donald Trump was right about a lot of things, right? So it's because they're realizing that the Democrat Party has like gone down this route so far now that it's like it can't help itself anymore.
Cutting rates today.
And so it no longer represents their, it's a tectonic shift in politics, and I don't know the way that it comes out. All of these people saying, oh, like Democrats, because of the demographics, are going to be completely in charge now for generations and stuff. It's not going to turn out that way, because
those are really
everything's shifting underneath of people.
So first of all, we have not discussed.
I don't understand, why does Odd smile? It must just be one of those things like, I'm on camera, I need to smile. But when she does it, it makes it seem like there's some sort of inside joke that's going on.
But of course, we need a lot more.
Yeah, and ironically, the lifetime politicians hate this, Mitch. Chuckling, yeah.
To be sufficiently confident. And your second question related to.
So this thing with Mitch McConnell basically giving up the leadership is a huge deal, because he negotiated an immigration deal, and the immigration deal that he negotiated was terrible. It was absolutely terrible.
Thank you.
And it matters because we are data.
I still get all of these people online trying to gaslight us into that immigration deal is the solution, and yada. It's hilarious.
Online participants, I'd like to give the floor to Tom Fairless of the Wall Street Journal. Tom, please.
Good afternoon, President Lagarde.
Good afternoon.
If Trump wins, then that's a big yes. Congress is going to be Democrat majority. I don't think so. So I do wonder.
U.S. angle. Firstly, investors are betting that the Fed and ECB will both start cutting around June and at a similar pace. And given the different economic landscape on both sides of the Atlantic, do you think that's reasonable that they should be expecting that?
My last reading of this was that it was really close in the House, but that the Senate was probably not was still gonna be divided, basically.
Jay Powell yesterday. in terms of...
Okay, Democrats need a gain of 5 seats.
And notwithstanding what you said about your ability to act independently, does it broadly make sense for major central banks to lower interest rates at the same time? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your question. But in a way, I think I addressed it earlier on when I explained that the ECB is an independent central bank and will act independently. So we will decide on the basis of the 3 criteria that I have mentioned earlier.
I haven't seen that documentary.
The measurements that we have, the projections that we have, the additional data that we need, we will determine what action.
Well, now listen, the way that the Democrat Party works, and this has always been the way that they work, and I don't understand why people forgot it. I think that a lot of it is that many people in the Republican Party or in politics in general are like relatively new. But the left works with lawfare. That has always been like their favorite tactic. Okay? Bill and Hillary were like activist lawyers. Right? So how does lawfare work? Well, the first thing about lawfare is you do it anyways, right? Whatever it is, the thing that is not supposed to happen, that is against the law or whatever the deal is, right? You do it anyways, and then you of course it gets into the courts, and then you have this multi-layered system of things to delay things as long as possible, so that by the time there's actually a ruling on it that puts a stop to the behavior that's not supposed to be happening, it doesn't matter anymore, and they got their way.
Thank you, Madame.
That's the way that they work, man.
Question for online participants from Eric Albert of Le Monde. Eric, please.
And that's what they're doing with the illegal immigration, as they're like, oh yeah, eventually maybe they'll do something and turn the valve off, but by that point, the demographics of the United States will have changed so much it doesn't matter anymore. That's what they're doing.
The loss of competitiveness of Europe. How permanent do you think it is? How worried should Europe be about that?
And you should always be, the big mistake that I think people make
Can you expand a little bit on your
is
thought about it? I mean, you said
that they don't realize that it's multi-tiered.
now.
It was like with the
I mean, what kind of data do you need to see?
with the college debt forgiveness thing. Okay, Biden comes out, he puts an order out, it goes to the Supreme Court rules against it. Guess what? Very next day, he uses a different law to do basically the exact same thing. So now that will also have to go through this big, huge, long political process and take years and yada, yada, yada. And by that point, everybody will have already had their debts paid off.
But you can observe that Europe has...
This time, with the Supreme Court and the Donald Trump thing, there's the same thing. It's like, okay, first thing that we'll do is we'll have these individual states go and try and take him off the ballot. And then when that inevitably fails and the Supreme Court, rejects that, then we can prosecute him. We'll actually have an attorney go in there and prosecute him for insurrection. And then that whole thing will go through a whole process and yada, 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 right? Like this time, the Supreme Court saw what was going in, and the conservatives on the court insisted on saying that the responsibility rests with Congress, and short-circuited their whole thing. They saw the multi-layered approach and got ahead of it. That's what happened there. That's why the left is so pissed off about the ruling. Because they wanted to then go and prosecute him for insurrection. Granted, they kind of were prosecuting him for insurrection
in the measurements, and that is
when they impeached him, but got acquitted.
So you have to get under the skin of that and determine
they didn't have the votes
and what drives it up. Clearly, it is wages. And because of this...
I find it kind of curious that we're towards the lows now.
What I've called the tit for tat.
Like, was all of that upside action just because of the ECB and now they're just kind of slumped back down to where we were before the session started because of...
dampened. This is not what I'm saying.
Nothing happened in the press conference and the trade is over?
Of services...
Jake Paul is going to fight Mike Tyson, what?
Services is moving just a tiny bit. It was at 4% for the last 3 months. It's moved to 3.9%. Domestic inflation is slightly up. So we have to be specifically attentive to wages. And as many of you know, and as I'm sure you know, a lot of the indicators that we have, a lot of the data that we receive are a bit outdated. We will get the Q4 number tomorrow, which is more than 2 months after the end of the quarter. So we have to look at other indicators as well. We have our wage tracker, which sticks to all the agreements that are negotiated and signed. There is about a third of the employees that are covered by that wage tracker, of which the contract will stop being covered by an agreement as of now or at the latest in March. So we need to have that as well. We look at Indeed, as everybody does as well. And all these elements are showing us that there is an element of moderation. So growth is moderating. It's not going...
Oh, Uzi has a link for it, huh?
In late 22 and in the course of 23. It's moderate. The growth of it is moderate.
Jake Paul and Mike Tyson announced fight in Dallas in July, live on Netflix is going to do live now? What?
Attention to is the corporate telephone.
Despite an age gap of 30 years.
To hear from the
yeah, is that actually a fair fight?
What is the labor shortage? How much hoarding
I need boxing experts.
do they have to try to anticipate a still tight labor market where wages are going to go?
It's funny to me that Mike Tyson still has star power.
To Minami Takeru of Nikkei. Minami, please.
Good afternoon, President Lagarde, and thank you so much for taking my question. So let me ask one question for better understanding. This is about wage growth and inflation. I think that even if wages continue to increase, the declining trend in underlying inflation may continue. It's just a possibility, but in this case, which one do you consider more important to decide to cut interest rates? The declining inflation trend.
Okay, here we go. Oh, that's what I want. Okay. Man, I was like, where will we go on Reddit to find the best information? Because I bet you there's a boxing subreddit, but it might not be very active, right? Oh no, it's active. There's already 96 comments on the story.
The inflation outlook.
This is ridiculous. Mike Tyson will be 58 years old. Are you kidding me? Yeah, the amount of money they threw at him must be astronomical. Youngest Jake.
And that indicates clearly that we are in this disinflationary process, that inflation is declining.
Are we really going to have to deal with Paul beating a 60-year-old Tyson and pretending he just beat a 1988 Tyson? I thought he was going to be taking this seriously now.
Particular wages. So we also look at that because we want to be stable on 3 accounts: inflation outlook.
Okay, so Mike Tyson is heavier than him.
On the latter, I think strength of transmission, we're seeing a good and solid transmission.
I don't know, man.
To the financing sector.
Size matters a lot, and old muscle is a thing.
Thank you.
Maybe it's not such a ridiculous fight.
Jean-Philippe, please.
What about Tyson's neck injury last year? I don't know.
You have to unmute. We do not hear you.
Oh no.
We do not see you either.
Oh no.
We do not hear you, Jean-Philippe.
Oh man. Embarrassing. It's surprising to me that we still got people that want to do it by the call.
Sorry.
Oh, whatever.
I can see you, but nobody
You can
hears
see
you.
him not happy with this computer. That's obviously the case.
Okay, well, it will be next time, Jean-Philippe. So we come to the end of our press conference. Thank you very much.
So that's just going to be the end? Oh my gosh.
11th of April. Until then, all the best. Thank you.
Okay, man. All right. Well, and as soon as the press conference ends, the S&P 500 are like, all right, we're ready to go. Let's do this. They're buying it. Where's our music volume? Let's turn the music back up a little bit. There we go. Money talks. BS runs the marathon. If Tyson shows up in as good a form as against RJJ, I don't know who that is, but he should knock him out. But it was 4 years ago, and at that age, 4 years is a lot. Yeah, it is. It's a glorified Make-A-Wish fight for Jake. Dude, I don't like these guys. There's some of these people, Jake Paul, that have just become social media sensations. And I feel like that you're giving all of the attention to the wrong people. Like people that are just not responsible with it. Octavius took a short. Well, I wish that I was short during that press conference, but you know, this is like the first opportunity for me to do anything, I think. I see a lot of volume down in here, so I don't really like, if you notice, I don't like trading when it's like it's already hot. I would prefer to like, I know which way it's going, but it's really quiet. I get in, then when things get hot, and then I get out. This kind of behavior down here kind of makes me think that we might get a few ticks more, but then we're going to get stuck in this area. Let's see here. What's Chayton saying? Invest my Roth in the S&P and then trade for fun with more volatile in SEP. So I don't know what you mean by the SEP account, but essentially, yes. When you're saving for retirement, the best thing for you to do is to just put your money in an S&P 500 index fund. And you can adjust the amount of bonds versus stocks that you have in your portfolio over time as well, right? Once you're putting enough money, I'm not going to say, some people will say, like, first max out your 401k, then max out your IRA, or not your 401k, but max out your employer's contribution. Max out your employer contribution, max out your IRA, then you can max out the 401k completely. And then if you have kids, you can do 529 accounts, right? But I have found that most people will get to the point where, assuming that you start early, you'll get to the point where you're basically fully funding everything and like retirement is taken care of well before you're maxing out those tax advantaged accounts. So I think that it makes sense to start putting some money aside into a separate account. And you could, I mean, if you want to make the most money or have the best risk reward chance at making the most money, you could also put that into an index fund. But here's a place where you can play with it a little bit. You can say, like, let's have a portfolio of 5 to 10 stocks. So there's some real advantages in doing that. Not just because you could potentially make money from it and everything. Okay, but at that point, you would be doing it in a separate account, and yes, what you make in that account would be taxed. But if you just buy and hold, you don't get taxed until you sell it, and you can borrow against it instead. So it's not so bad. The only one that's a kicker there is if you have kids, college expenses may be higher than you anticipate. So you take advantage of those 529 accounts if you can. But here's the thing. I have a hot take for you. Financial education ain't all it is cracked out to be. You have all of these people out there, they're like, oh, if you want to be successful and you need to understand how the world, you need to get a financial education. And there's all of these people, man, so many finance influencers out there on TikTok and so forth now vying for your attention. And they're all selling some sort of a course, right? And I'm not saying that those courses are necessarily bad. But what I'm trying to tell you is that your problem is not the financial education, okay? There are so many people that are extremely educated and financially educated, and it still doesn't predict that they make the right financial decisions and that they get their retirement completely taken care of and this and that. Now, part of the problem probably is just because it is really, really hard to save up enough for retirement, okay? But the other issue is that knowledge is not the same thing as experience. if you go and you tell somebody, okay, this is what you got to do to save for retirement, and you teach them that one time, okay, now they're educated, and then they never think about it again for the rest of their life. What do you think the chances are that when the time comes for them to make those decisions, that they remember that information and actually act in the optimal manner? Very, very low, right? To give you the best chance, it needs to be something on your mind every day. Every day. How do you do that? Well, managing a portfolio is a really great way to do that. If you are reading about companies and following those companies, 5 to 10 companies, you're looking at it every day. You put in like 10 hours a week into this venture, right? And it doesn't even have to be real money. It could just be a fake account, right? It could just be a paper account, okay? But going through that every day, you're going to be thinking about that stuff every day. You're going to be reading the financial news every day. And that's where you're going to get the experience, so that when the time comes to make those financial decisions, like it was for me, when should I buy a house? What is an appropriate amount of money for me to spend on a house? Do I really need to rush right now or not? I did, because I knew that interest rates were going to rise, right? Because it was something that I was thinking about every day. I made the correct choices. And so, my net worth is hundreds of thousands of dollars more, simply because of the day trading thing, that I keep myself informed with the market, and I'm able to make better decisions because of that. Experience. You need experience. And finance is not something that you just read in a textbook and then go and do. It's something that you have to come in and work at every day. You need to think of finance as more like a skill, like dribbling a basketball, rather than like, just a piece of knowledge that you store in your brain and then regurgitate out at the right time. Let's see. I have my first kid coming in September, and I'm 24. Oh, there you go. Yeah. So if your employer matches 5%, so what I would say is put in 5%, whatever it is. Just always max that out. If you always max that out from the age of 24, you'll be in a good spot, right? Yeah. All these people, they have to like really start putting more and more of their income in to be able to save up enough and everything. If you just always hit that employer match, that alone will probably be enough, get you pretty close to being able to retire. Like that alone will allow you to retire. You probably have a little bit of a decrease in income, but and then, if you continue to do well and, make more and more money, man, I tell you what, I said this was the first chance for me to go short, and I don't like it, but look, they've just continued to plow down here. It's not stopping. I'm still a little bit like, so I don't think that this is going to be like a trend day or anything. There's a couple of stops down here, but to get to the overnight lows, that would be all the way down to 11. So there could still be a decent amount of selling left in this. But I am just too nervous to take it. And we've been around 4.1 a lot lately as well. So I don't like the prices that I'm getting in the micros. I should have taken it like over here at 8.5. 0.85. Anyways, what was I saying? Always max out the employer match, right? Now, after that, you get the Roth IRA account, right? The advantage of the Roth IRA account is that it's more flexible. Like you can use the funds in your Roth IRA as a first-time home buyer. You can use it for medical expenses. You can use it for education expenses. So putting it into the Roth IRA is really valuable, right? You can put $7,000 a year into your Roth IRA, okay? Most people aren't going to get to that point. Most people maxing out the 401k and maxing out the Roth IRA, most people don't get to that point. Right? But if you do get to that point, then yeah, you could start putting money in a separate account. If you're super into trading and everything, you could put some money into a separate account. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a ton, right? It could just be a few $1,000s to have a small little portfolio for you to play with. Buy and hold portfolio. Or again, you just trade it paper. Because the important thing is it's something that you're doing every day. Yeah, that was a great trade, Octavius. I feel left out. There's 4-1. Kind of curious the way that this has been moving too, because
block sell.
Well, wow, block sell, huh? Wow, that's a big old monster at 16, man. But I can kind of see why Octavius might be taking profits in this area. Like, if I had caught that whole swing, this would be one of the spots that I would be looking at to get
block
out
buy.
Sure. So, wow, block sell, then a block buy immediately afterwards. What? And both at 16. Overnight initial balance low. Yeah, it's just like it's coming at to too many key levels and too much volume is trading down in here for me to feel like I could really take a momentum trade here. Or like, let's not call it a momentum trade, but you know, think that it could continue to go through. I think that we should start to see square root law start to limit things here. I use the 24/7 profile because I'm a charlatan. Oh. Yeah, I don't know if like those, I've never been able to find any kind of good stats on like initial balance and that sort of a thing. But like daily highs and lows definitely matter. And like swing spots kind of matter, right? Like swing, so for instance here, we're right at one tick away from where ZB is at the lows, right? Of the last swing, essentially. So that can matter to liquidity. I don't know if it matters a whole lot in this situation, but you know, the situation at the moment is that it probably takes less contracts for us to move up than it is for us to move down, because there hasn't been a whole lot of time for the liquidity over here to heal. Whereas the liquidity down here hasn't been touched since before the session. So it's a small thing that probably doesn't matter as much as like what are the market orders that are going to come through, but it is just like a small little thing that we can notice. In this situation though, like we've had 23,000 trade at 16. That is a big red flag to me that the square root law is starting to take hold. That a liquidity hole is starting to form in that spot. So we've had enough trend that they might continue to push it. A lot of the time they will do this like further stop run, and then that's kind of the end of it, and then they'll come back to that spot. That sort of a thing happens. Sometimes it is a trend day, but I think it's highly unlikely that it's a trend day. So I think that we're probably going to hang out at 16 for a while. They'll just they'll build out the volume profile around 16. So let's see if I'm right. But basically means that the trade, the real trade happened during the ECB press conference, and so I missed it. Because I didn't want to take any position during the press conference. Oh, so I was still reading about Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. If this isn't an exhibition, Mike will be flatlined, I'm afraid. A near 60-year-old man with 54 fights against a young athletic boxer with a decent power and experience. Yeah. It's 100% going to be exhibition. I doubt anyone gets knocked out. Probably another draw. This stuff is another money grab, an example of Paul not actually taking boxing as seriously as he claims. I think what you said about 16 already happened yesterday. What do you mean by that? What, did we spend some time yesterday at 16? We kind of did, actually, yeah. 16 was like the area that we had belt volume at before it spiked up and then came back down, right? $16 is also like the point of control for the session, because apparently there was some trade there overnight, so that's curious. But what I'm more interested in is how much it traded there and the way that the liquidity reacted to it. So it's a very clear, like, exhaustion of the liquidity, and now it's back up 2 ticks. That's a liquidity hole. I don't want to get in on that, because the liquidity hole basically means that we're going to kind of be stuck for a while. New study has found microplastics in the clogged arteries of more than half of heart disease. Yeah, you know what? I think that 100 years from now, you talk about the things that, like, what are the things that we look at in the past and we're horrified that people did? Like, that you made buildings out of asbestos? Like, what is effing wrong with you? That's crazy, sort of a thing. I think that microplastics is the issue. I think that microplastics are having a very significant impact on people's health, and like, we're slowly starting to figure it out. And the problem is that the microplastics are so widespread now that, like, what can you even do about it? Because I keep seeing studies that are like, microplastics affect us twice as much as we thought. There are twice as many microplastics out there as we thought. There's, this and that sort of a thing. Like, we're only now starting to realize the enormity of the issue. It's funny. You know what? Today we have talked about a lot of things that aren't exactly the market. I don't know why y'all's just bringing those things up, but you're bringing up things that are like enough of an interest for me to trigger me, right? Because there's certain things you could talk about, like conspiracy theories or whatever, and I'd just be like, whatever, don't care, right? Microplastics is one of the ones that I'm curious about, because the market is all about changing the topic away from the market. That's funny. Well, you know what that reminds me of? Is that trade that we saw at the very beginning. There was a break of the high, and then as soon as they broke the high, a fairly large 3,000 contracts or so showed up on the bid. So people started trading it up, and then 7,000 hit into 27 and filled an iceberg there. And then ever since that point, it has just been slow tick down. So I think that was almost certainly a spoof. Probably somebody that wanted to get something executed before the ECB came out. And the flows have just been all negative since then. I'm a little bit, I kind of am still a little bit miffed about the way that this is going today. Because, well, I would like to see the market sell overall. I think that interest rates are not as likely to be cut this year as people think, and I'm still very concerned about inflation coming back. And I think that this most recent rise is not. I don't think it completely fits. Okay, so now today, finally, a downside large meta order, but I don't actually know what's driving it. Just like I didn't know what was driving the buying the last few moves up that we've had. So I don't know. This one may not be like a large meta order, like I'm gonna hold this for a long time, and that this one could just be like they made an attempt to break things out to the upside, and then they got stuck and they're just giving it all up, because this is basically where we were at yesterday, right? Okay, I'm done reading about Jake Paul though. And close that. How did I end up with 4 tabs open about that? Okay. Oh. The other thing, I still have some of these tabs. I'm realizing how ADHD I am at the moment, right? We were talking about the election. What are the chances that the Democrats hold the House? I'd say it's about 50-50. But if Donald Trump wins, I think that enough of the demographics would be going along. I think that the scenario where Donald Trump wins, but the Republicans lose the House, is a less likely scenario. But I do think that Uzi's got a good point there, that like if that does happen, the first thing that I would be looking at is, they're going to try and impeach him again. They'll have impeached him a third time, and then nothing happens. And then they'll probably do it, later in his presidency. And there'll be like 4 impeachments that he gets passed. And at what point will people start to say, maybe this is a game and not that serious? But Okay, so I do see here Alligator in Discord pointing out that Fed's Bowman speaking says January inflation suggests inflation progress may be slow. See, that's more in line with like what I think should be the narrative in the treasury market right now. Maybe that is causing some selling. If they have a majority in both houses, no, they would have to have a 2/3 majority, right? It takes a 2/3 majority in the Senate to successfully remove him from office. They will not have that. In the Senate, it will be 50-50, right? Like if one party has a majority in the Senate, it'll be like by 1 or 2 votes, right? So yeah, they could have enough to like do proceedings and stuff, but how would they get 2/3 majority to actually remove him from office? Well, if Donald Trump actually did something, like if they really had, and I'm sure that he could be making mistakes, and he could do something that is like really impeachable, right? Maybe he could do something that's bad enough to get enough Republicans to flip over and to vote in favor of impeachment, right? But we're talking about the scenario where they try to impeach him just as soon as he's in office, right? That one probably doesn't work out. And frankly, if that's what they do, I don't think it would be to their advantage. I think that people would really be sick of it by that point. But if they actually had something new to impeach him on, maybe it's a different story. Okay, so I think I called that one pretty well, man. Because I was saying as soon as it touched 16, like 746, 748, yeah, this looks like a liquidity hole. And now, like, what, 15 minutes later, still stuck there. Good call. I wish that I could make trades off of a call like that, because think I'm starting to get pretty good at recognizing and seeing where they're going to form. But all it does is tell you that it's probably not a good time to trade. Meanwhile, S&P 500, they started out a little bit bullish, but are turning into Chop City. So there's a story from NPR that I think is probably going to be this is a story that will probably do well on Reddit today. How the porn bots took over Twitter. Is that really the case? Oh my. That started to happen to you on... Wait, how so? Like some of your Facebook friends would get their accounts taken over or something? The suggested feed was suddenly filled with softcore porn. Oh, really? That is weird. Well, that's definitely Instagram, man. Like, so I don't really see a whole lot of suggested things on Instagram. I don't know. I feel like that my Instagram account is like hopelessly broken. Because basically what happened was Instagram was the thing, and I didn't understand it. I'm like, well, you can post pictures on Facebook. And then they bought Instagram, and it's like, and they own Facebook. So why Instagram and not just Face? It doesn't make any sense to me. And the other thing that really like weirded me out about it was that all of the like the rave group stuff that was going on at the time went to Instagram. So like all of a sudden there wasn't the activity in the Facebook groups or the forums for the local scene. It all happened on Instagram, which wasn't as good of a community, let's say, right? But so I say, okay, I got to switch over to Instagram. So I go in and I just start adding in as many people as I can. I treated it like the same way I did everything else, which was like, you need to have like 1,000 or more followers before like anything interesting happens with the social network. And so I've got to add as many people as I can. So it was like everybody that Instagram suggested to me, I would add. And, you know, I think that most of the people that it told me to add are pretty good. Like there are like girls and models that I have on my feed, but I find their content interesting beyond just them being good looking. But, you know, I don't get good information on Instagram or anything like that. And so it is mostly, I would say, pictures of good looking people and health fitness influencers type of thing, right? So if I go to the search, you know, like when you do search on Instagram and then it just shows you a bunch of like recommended images, you know, and there's like this whole wall, it's all girls. The scary thing is that my brain is like, you know, there's a lot of cheese pizza. Meta, let's hang out on their platform. So I was like, how long before it makes its way into this mess? Yeah. Well, on Facebook, I've always gotten a lot of spam requests. And then for my Pokemon Go group, I run a Pokemon Go Facebook group, and I get hundreds of spam requests to join the group every day. Yeah, it has a question. And it just asks where you live, and if you say that you live somewhere in Utah, then I let you in, and the people that don't answer it or answer it incorrectly, they're all thrown out. So that's an easy way to filter it, but like it's funny. The people that aren't from the US and like how they try and answer the question, that they say like they guess, they say yes, or yes, I agree to the rules, or something like that. It's just like, ultimately I just stay off of Facebook. Yeah. Well, I really hate the way that it went, though. Because basically, everybody tried to be like Twitter. Is ultimately what happened. Is Twitter became the place where it was like, if you were a celebrity, you had this following, and you could get something out, and if you tweeted about something, it was everywhere, right? But that was never what made Facebook, the social network that it was. Facebook was interesting because I could see what people I actually knew were like actually doing. You get an idea of what kind of interesting things that you had going on in their life, like what kind of a job they had now, and what they were doing, and if people were making content in particular. And that's where I think is the more interesting, is like, if they're doing photography or they're taking pictures, like I'd like to see that. If you are starting a new online business, I want to see those sorts of things. And the social media companies came out and said, oh, no. They have to pay us for that sort of stuff. We don't want people being able to put their content out and get free publicity for it. But that was the whole point, guys. That was the whole point. And so now Facebook is just stupid. Now it's just stupid. Hardly anything interesting on Facebook. And so, yeah, I maybe visit Facebook like once a week, and I never post anything. And it sucks because I would like to know more about people. I would like to like reconnect with people and things, but it's just like, it's not that the ecos, I had a lot of good experiences getting involved with communities and things like that through Facebook, and it's just not like that anymore post 2016. Seeing giant tits and breasts. That reminds me of this thing where my parents, they had a friend that ran a trampoline park. And for some bizarre reason, this woman decided that she was going to get in the middle of all the trampolines and start breastfeeding her baby in the middle of the trampoline park. So this was like an activist kind of person. They're going out and doing it. She got kicked out, and so then they make this whole big storm about, they don't support breastfeeding mothers. And no, it's because breastfeeding an infant in the middle of a trampoline park where a bunch of 8-year-old kids are rambunctiously jumping around the room is not safe for an infant, you moron. Oh my gosh. You just reminded me of that whole thing. The stuff that happened. That tick down at 15.5 seems significant, and now look, wow, like all at once there, 7K traded at 15, and now they're trying to trade it back across 15.5, and there's an iceberg there as well. So it looks like if we're in a large meta order, that there's maybe more to go. We've only been here for about 30 minutes, but as of late, when we've been getting those kinds of trends, they haven't waded through for the whole thing. So I suppose we could be seeing another meta order coming through, but I'm a little bit skeptical, especially with that much volume trading and being absorbed in that area. It makes me a little bit uneasy about it. I can definitely, you know, like maybe it'd be different if they had traded through the 15 and then it stayed offer, but instead it ticked up and then you saw iceberg and they ticked up through that iceberg too. So I guess there's big icebergs on both sides here. So really is more like the old days with the icebergs, because it used to be that like 3,000 would trade at every price, you know, and that 5K was just kind of like an average iceberg, and you'd see icebergs all over the place, and it was often very, very confusing if you really tried to trade the icebergs. And then we went through this whole period where the market liquidity wasn't there, and so that wasn't a thing, but now it's back. This feels like the old treasuries to me. Let's see here. Oh, I'm just browsing back to Twitter now. Nick Timmeros, we thought we had 2 feet on the brakes, but maybe we only have 1 foot on the brake, says Neil Kashkari. In December, he penciled in 2 cuts for 2024, but thinks the question now is whether it could be 1 cut. If growth is good and inflation is falling, why do anything? Oh, dude, actually, wow. That is the best way of describing how I feel. Is like, if inflation is falling and we're continuing to have good growth, why would they change anything? Why would you cut interest rates with the market doing as well as it is right now? Right? You cut interest rates when economic weakness is coming through. And I mean, there are some of these numbers that look weak, but they continue to plow through it. I think that a lot of it is government stimulus. I think a lot of it is immigration, too. Powell said that in his testimony yesterday, that the amount of immigration that's coming through is benefiting the economy. Yes. So you really don't need to cut interest rates in that case. I only wanted to cut interest rates because we had this idea that the weakness is going to come through and because people wanted the economy to look good for the election. It is a stimulus. Because the government is borrowing money to give to migrants. Ow. Oh, yeah, I forgot that Powell is speaking now the last 5 minutes. I forgot to turn my new squawk back on after the ECB. Silly me. Are we rising back up now because of Powell speaking? Aren't we glad that we didn't try going short here in the 16 area? Yeah. There are 8.5 million people, 100% are consumers, yeah. You have to have population growth is like one of the most correlated things with GDP growth over the really high time frame period. Which is why these countries in Europe are like so desperate to import as many people as possible when their birth rates and everything are declining.
Taking a look at the fear and greed index, 75 out of 100 equaling extreme greed, and the crypto fear and greed index, 82.
I would say though that of the stimulus that I'm aware of, that the immigration is probably only one of many minor factors. I think that a lot of it has been through government workers. One thing. The problem is that when the reverse repo facility runs out, then there's not so much stimulus. So maybe that's why the market still expects rate cuts, is that maybe it wasn't happen in time for March, but I can definitely see a scenario where, okay, they shut the pipe off, and then we realize where we're really at, and then they are very quickly realize, oh, we do need to cut rates. Maybe. That's kind of the scenario that I'm the most concerned about, let's say.
So Sweden's government has made the formal decision to join NATO.
If Jay Powell cuts rates, won't that risk him ceding control over the rates a bit? Oh, I don't know if that's really a concern on people's minds. There is this kind of question about, like, how independent is the Fed? Are they being influenced or coerced by political factors? But I really don't think that the Federal Reserve and Powell in particular really think about that sort of a thing. It kind of seems to me like Jay Powell is going to retire and or get replaced in the next presidential term either way. And who do they put in place? We'll see. If Joe Biden is president again, I think there's a pretty good chance that we get Federal Reserve President Mester, which probably wouldn't be too bad. If it's Donald Trump, man, who knows what happens? Who knows what happens? I would think that the best shoo-in for that would probably be the New York governor, Williams, right? Or one of the hawks that's already on the Federal Reserve. Or for all I know, he might try and bring in somebody completely new and out there. So which intelligence operation news organization do you think Nikki Haley is going to wind up at? Oh, well, she's almost certainly going to, show up on Fox a ton. I don't know if I don't think that Nikki will actually get like a deal. Like those, like Huckabee. When Huckabee basically gave up on the politics, he signed a deal with Fox or something like that. I don't know if Nikki Haley is going to do that. I think that she would be more of a freelancer, right? Show up on all of the networks, but probably Fox and CNN the most. He needs to crash the market before his term ends. Woohoo, Powell? I don't know. Here's the thing. Powell, most legendary moment in Federal Reserve history. Jay Powell's giving a speech. Protesters tried to interrupt him, and he says in a hot mic moment, "Shut the fucking door." Greatest Federal Reserve president ever in my mind at that point. S tier Federal Reserve president at that point. Doesn't matter what happens from here because it's already done the greatest thing that a Federal Reserve president could ever do. You know, he's had his turn. We could have somebody else. You know what I really want to see though? This is a little crazy. Many people will criticize me for saying this, okay? But I still want to see Federal Reserve Chairman Dimon. I still think that Jamie Dimon is probably the best choice you could ever make for Federal Reserve president. I want to see, I mean, maybe it's a disaster. Could be a disaster. I want to see what happens when you put somebody that has really, really big, long experience on the banking side. Because most central bankers come more from the economics side of it rather than the business side of it. Nobody knows more about the U.S. banking system than Jamie Dimon, and so I want to see what he would do as Federal Reserve president. I think it'd be really interesting. Is he too old to do it? I mean, he is starting to sell his stocks. It kind of looks to me like Jamie Dimon is retiring. Dimon is the U.S. banking system. It's, you know, tell you what, man. JP Morgan is a big bank. It's a big bank. You know what? It's something that I always find kind of funny is that there's a lot of people on the conservative side of the aisle that really dislike the institution of the Federal Reserve in general and think that the Federal Reserve should be abolished. And one of the arguments that they always make for the Federal Reserve is that the Federal Reserve is kind of technically a private bank. Like the big banks are all members of the Federal Reserve, and there's this whole system. But it's kind of both. It is run like a business so that you actually, you know, have to be competent. But all of the decisions are made by the Federal Reserve Board, and those are selected by the president. And there's that's the whole thing. So there's this interesting system that allows them to be independent, but are still checked by the rest of government, right? So they complain about how the Federal Reserve has this kind of power and it's a private bank. But the reality is, in our financial system today, is that money is created by the banks. Like, if you go to JP Morgan and you take out a loan, what happens is they add a number in a spreadsheet and create your loan. So everybody thinks they have to have the money first. No, they don't. That's not the way that it works. And the old model that we thought of a fractional reserve, that's maybe what our system was intended to be. But in practice today, that is not what it is. Banks create money. JP Morgan creates money. They create money based on, you know, people that are eligible to actually lend to. And, you know, there's all these sorts of things that factor into it. But basically, when they loan money out to people, they expect that money to be paid back eventually. And that's the key thing. You can all print money. You can go to the bank today and you can print money. The only caveat is you have to have the ability to pay it back later. That's how it all works. So banks have this power. And everybody seems to be in denial about that the banks have that power. It's so weird to me. Yeah, Jamie Dimon is an extremely powerful person in the United States system because he is the head of the largest bank, and all banks can print money. Awkward silence here as the playlist ends, and I have to restart it. Oh, no, wait. That one just has a really long break at the end. We're good. They're still trying to bust out of this range. So it looks to me like you've got a pretty hard liquidity hole still there. We're to the point where I think that we could say that the liquidity should be healed somewhat, but there's still relatively big icebergs on the down here. So it kind of looks to me like we could get a little bit of a breakout lower, possibly. But I'm not expecting anything too exciting because it's been a slow mover, right? It's been like a train. It moves slow, but you can't stop it. An interesting little offer there at 16 now too, by the way. But that's probably just because it's a big even number.
Fed's Powell says when rates are normalized, underlying housing shortage will still put upward pressure on prices. 1 minute remaining.
Well, what's this right here? Powell, when rates are normalized, the underlying housing shortage will still put upward pressure on prices. Yes. So I'm probably in a situation where I'd be very tempted to just kind of like zone out.
10 seconds.
But I should continue to watch this. Oh, here we're about to get natural gas stocks, by the way.
Draw 40 BCF, draw 40 BCF, lower than the expected draw of 37 BCF.
Well,
we have posted the USDIA weekly natural gas storage report on the feed for all those interested.
There was a big sell, but they ticked back up and they're at 16 and more volume going through at 16. They're really liking when you get a liquidity hole at 16, those can be some of the most frustrating ones, right? It is still, I mean, it's only been 2 minutes. We're still in a period where I think you could see a further move, but let's see. Like, I'm skeptical that there's another large meta order or another leg to the meta order. I'm just saying if there was, it would be now. So we're in the time frame now and for the next 15 minutes, let's say. And if we don't get anything within the next 15 minutes, then it's probably like really done for the most part, unless, until some other sort of thing kind of kicks them in the butt and gets them to move, like maybe a Powell comment or something. Well, that's weird. There's now an investigation into a Salt Lake bar that has a no Zionist allowed policy. So if you support Israel, apparently you're not welcome at that bar. And people are pointing out that, like, they have pretty strict laws against drinking alcohol and so forth. So, like, Islam does. So, like, the people that would be, appreciate what they're doing would never visit their bar. Dude, that's crazy that there is a bar in Utah willing to do that, though. That's like I'm shocked that it would happen in Utah, Oh, apparently the guy that owns it tried to become mayor. Well, glad that didn't that didn't happen. Jeez, that's crazy. My nose really, really itches today. You see me constantly touching my face, like, nose itches. It's just dry. There's nothing in it either. It's just dry, I think. Did tick down. I'm looking at this. I'm wondering if Bitcoin's going to make its move today or not. It's still kind of, it looks like maybe they made an attempt at some point today, but it was like short-lived. So I don't know. Nose itches maybe because of dry eyes. Looking at screens of long times can dry your eyes. Well, I live in Utah, right? Utah is a very dry climate. It's a somewhat of a unique climate that you do not find in many places in the world, where it is both extremely dry and in very high elevation, and gets cold enough to have snow in the winter. Because, like, it's really dry in Arizona, but they don't get a whole lot of snow. So we're in this period where it starts to get dry, where, like, the storms are kind of, like, dried out, and they haven't had a good storm in a bit. And, you know, you get a little dehydrated overnight, and so that's probably why my nose is so dry, and it just... My eyes, on the other hand, are always, oh my gosh. My eyes are always watering because I have allergies. Very strong allergies. Although this time of year, the winter tends to be better for me. Spring comes along and then, oh my gosh. Like, I can't go outside without glasses. Do intermittent fasting and well, I'm pretty skeptical that if I just stopped dairy that I wouldn't have allergies anymore. I don't think it works that way. I think that to get rid of my allergies that you have to do something to reset all of the mast cells in my body so that they no longer view dog dander and pollen and mold and dust mites as, you know, invaders. I do kind of avoid cheese a little bit more these days, though. There was this documentary on Netflix about, like, diets and whatnot. And with the way that that's going, they kind of were, like, trying to compare a vegetarian diet. So they kind of made it seem like they were promoting a vegetarian diet. But what I got from what I had watched of it was that cheese is really bad for you and that you shouldn't eat a lot of cheese. That Americans have too much cheese in their diet because the government has been pushing it because we produce too much of it and we're, like, stockpiling it, and they got to get rid of it somehow. That crazy. That's the way it goes. I'm telling you again, we live in an age that is tyranny of the system. We're not tyrannized by tyrants. We're tyrannized by the system as a whole, which is, like, a much worse problem. It's a good thing that we have the amount of freedom that we do have and that it's not so bad. Because if the tyranny was as bad as historical tyranny, but it was the tyranny of the system, then we'd just be screwed and there'd be nothing, you know, I don't know if you can really fix those kinds of problems when it's the system, not just a guy. Because a guy will die, a guy can be overthrown. System, even if you overthrow the system might survive. Right? It's just sitting there, like, right at the low, but they're just not going for it yet. Back to 16. Well, you know what? We got 15 minutes left, but I think that is just going to chill here at 16 for the rest of the... Well... There's some people that come and try and spam the Discord server on a regular basis, and I'm wondering if I should add them to the list of names to just auto ban. Oh, did you see this story about OpenAI publishing Elon Musk's emails? Because Elon Musk was suing OpenAI for abandoning their mission, which, you know, I think that they abandoned their mission, and I don't like what happened. But then they have these emails where Elon Musk was basically telling them to become a for-profit. So what do you do with that? I don't know, because I still think that OpenAI should be sued for abandoning their mission. It's just you've got to get the right interested party to sue them, right? But it sure does look to me like he's just suing them because, you know, he's trying to become their competitor. Can you imagine? Oh my gosh. Remember a few years ago when Elon Musk was all about Mars and everyone was super keen to follow? Can you imagine living in a facility where Musk literally controls the air supply and then rides back to Earth? Oh my gosh. Well, a good comment. That had not crossed my mind. I don't think that I will go to Mars. No. I'm totally down for becoming one of the space noids, but every sci-fi, like, Mars sucks. Like Mars is like the big city that is crime ridden and yada yada yada. You're like, you don't want to go to Mars. You can live in one of the space colonies. Like the really rich space colony. It's extra beautiful and everything. That's interesting. OpenInsider.com shows that not a single share of Nvidia has been purchased by insiders since 2020. Well, I don't know if that means anything, though. You know, well, I guess the one thing that I've missed is that the S&P 500 is up 20 points now. So they're looking pretty good. In fact, when I come and I look at it on a volume profile, that looks very, very nice indeed, doesn't it? You know what? I need to increase the margin over here, right? Side margin, make it more like 20, okay? Oh, how far do I need to make it? 50? Let's do 100.
Fed's Pal says the quantity of homes available for sale is incredibly low.
Okay, so we have reached a new weekly high in the S&P 500. Sometimes they'll do a breach like that and then, you know, come back across it. So I wouldn't say that the breach of that means anything, but it does mean that the S&P 500 is looking awfully bullish because that is like an all-time high, isn't it? Yeah. There you go. Look at that chart, man. Well, I would say it is kind of slowing. I think that we are getting kind of like a
inflation come down, but
I think that what you'll see is. Let me see if I can draw this. Right, we've got this trend line going, and I think that it's kind of doing this. Then maybe it jumps up like that afterwards. But for now, the question is, how far can the S&P 500 go today?
And Powell says the housing market is in a very, very difficult situation.
Who is Mark Robinson? I absolutely want to go back to the America where women couldn't vote. Oh my. He's a GOP candidate for some swing state, isn't he? North Carolina GOP nominee for governor. Oh, yeah. Okay, now I remember. This was the guy that was like, it was kind of a little bit of an upset. Yep. So it is a Republican candidate in a key swing state. I want to say that, like, that sentiment is not reflective of Republican voters, but, like, I've had that argument with Republican voters many, many times where they try to argue. Like, have you guys seen this girl on, I think she's on YouTube. Isn't she on YouTube, Pearl?
Dollar slips refresh 6
Just
weeks
pearly
low versus
things?
euro.
Oh, you're not
Euro
supposed
long.
to hear the news squawk. Sorry about that. And she has a shirt that says women shouldn't vote. Because her view is like, oh, all of the decisions that we've made since women started voting have been awful, so women shouldn't vote. That's not the reason democracy works well is because it aligns the power with people's best interests. And so if you have a large, 50% of people disenfranchised, then that system will never work for them. So even if there is a group of people, and I'm not saying that women make bad voting decisions, but even if we had a group of people that tend to make bad voting decisions, we shouldn't necessarily disenfranchise them, right? We should look for alternative ways to, understand the fallacies and traps that they fall into and help them understand that and make better decisions rather than disenfranchising them. Just like we've had to do with men. Men have a tendency to, want to go to war and be too aggressive sometimes. So we're always warning about that the politicians will trick you into going to war and stuff. Well, I think there was a point where we were at 4.1 and I was like, I could do something here. But like, look, we've made another good move there. That was a breakout. It was a rough breakout. It took quite a bit of volume for them to do it, but it does look like we are getting the second leg. This leg will probably be smaller than the last leg. There could be a tendency for it to flip back up on us, and it's about time for me to get going, so it just happened too late. That's one of the things that I hate is that it seems like when there are opportunities where I could have taken advantage of it, like I'm a little bit too picky about it. But it's okay. I don't need to do anything this week. We still got non-farms tomorrow. Non-farms tomorrow will be huge, so... Actually, I don't think that this non-farms is as anticipated as some in the past have been. But I think that there's still going to be plenty of opportunity for volatility, so... I'll see you guys then. In the meantime, stay excellent, team.